to the pleasure of being at these sort of events. I must introduce our guest. Everyone knows who he is and what he's done. I know that you've all come because this gentleman here is responsible for many great gaming and televisual memories that you've got. I'm sure, like myself, he is probably responsible for many impulse purchases that you made with your hard-earned or not-earned pocket money, browsing cassettes on shelves and thinking, that looks a bit good. That's probably down to this gentleman here as well, and we'll be talking a little bit about his life in games, and we'll be talking about his amazing work on Knightmare. Without this gentleman, that would never have come to be. We wouldn't all have rushed home quite so fast from school to watch that. And we'll be doing some questions. If you've got some questions, what we're going to do is we'll talk about gaming first, and we'll have a little bit on questions on that, and then we'll talk about Knightmare, and you have a chance to ask questions about that as well. But ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together and welcome David Rowe!
Such a warm welcome here, and for a guy who lives on a remote mountainside in West Wales and I don't get out much, it's been fantastic, so I'm having a great time. Thank you.
Have you always lived there?
Well, no, I was a baby once.
You may have been a baby born on a remote mountainside in Wales, which is a different story.
Well, we moved there 28 years ago, so we built a garden on a plateau 450 feet up above the Tavy Valley. And we went there because our son was diagnosed with autism, and we just wanted to get out and away. And we've loved it ever since. Developed a huge garden, 3.5 acres, a lot of hard work, and worked from home because I had the half-tone fax machine I could send from.
Yeah, which we'll be hearing about. This is how art happens. And were your parents artists? Were they?
No, not at all.
Not involved in any media? No influences from those sort of things?
None whatsoever. No, my mother was very keen that I went into hospital work and joined the lab. So she worked on my younger brother instead when I was the wildcat. And he's the head of the blood transfusion service in Wales, so he's done very well.
So when did you start being interested in arts?
It was during my school years. I would draw and paint at home, but through steering by parents and so on, I went into zoology, botany and English A-level. And then I met my wife, who was an inspiration. She was at art school or foundation, and she inspired me to basically leave home and move and live with her at the tender age of 17, and we're still together now. We've been married 46 years.
There you go.
And she's an artist too.
Right, okay. And was art something that came to you easily, or did you have to practice really, really hard?
Well, you've got to work at it. What you have to have in the first place is the implication and the aptitude to want to do it, and to seek and search all the time and question. And so that's what led me on. I mean, it is work, they say, musicians aren't born, they have to practice. And it's the same, and I definitely felt a progression in the work as I did more and more of it.
Okay, and what did you used to draw when you first started? What were your favourite things?
Well, I was definitely into fantasy art, so sketchbooks were piling on all the time. But when I first left art school, I was doing sort of brochures, drawings of pubs and that sort of thing.
So you found work quite early?
Oh yeah. I've got the very first airbrushed illustration I did, which was the first job after school, art school, and that was a scrapbook cover of W.H. Smith, 31p. I actually bought 6 copies in Churchill Square in Brighton in Smith's, and there was one left, so I put that on the top of the pile. That's how.
This is something I'm learning is common amongst people we talk here. The Oliver twins told us yesterday they used to move all their games to the top shelf of the charts.
Never edge on, you've got to be front on. But
that's one of your earliest pieces of work?
The very first.
That was the cover of a sketchbook?
A scrapbook.
A scrapbook.
So it was filled with coloured sugar paper. I actually had to go out and buy an airbrush from Mr. Connor in Shoreham-on-Sea, who Connor Instruments.
You hadn't?
Lovely guy. I hadn't got one, no.
You'd used one, presumably?
No. But how do you get the air for it? Now, the compressors were really expensive, and I don't think you could get the gas canisters then. So I got an overinflated car tyre, got the metal brass cap, and drilled a hole in it and soldered in a tube, which I fitted to the airbrush. So I'd get it up to about 60 pounds, and then airbrush. But the trouble is, no moisture trap. You'd get a drop of water, and every now and again. But I finished it.
And a car with 3 wheels. I mean, that's a great piece of work, right there. But there's a lot going on there, which isn't sort of so familiar, perhaps, to some of us who know your work well. And were you given free rein on this stuff?
Yeah, it was make it sporty and outdoor action. So I suppose I was anticipating the games industry in a way, and I feel a lot of things I was doing was sort of waiting for that industry to come along.
Were you a gamer? This is the early days, of course. I don't know. I wouldn't ever want to say anything about ages, but could you give us a clue as to what era we're talking about here?
Well, I remember bragging to someone who had a 16K Spectrum that I had the 48K version. Yeah,
Come on,
big memory, big memory.
Rubber keys. Not many of them still work.
I've still
Rubber
got
keys.
one covered in paint spots because it was always quite near my work.
So what did you play? What did you like playing at a young age?
Not a young age so much. I had an Atari ST. I did Mission Elevator. I really enjoyed Tetris, of course. Populous I played a lot, naturally, because I was given the beta version to have a look at while I came up with ideas for the cover, which I was given free rein on.
Were you playing games before anybody hired you to work as an artist in games?
No, because it was that early on. It was that early on. I met Nick Lambert and John Hollis, who had formed Quicksilver, and they'd made a load of money going to the Horticultural Hall in Westminster, selling the add-on cards for the ZX81. There was a sound generator and a character generator. And I remember one day, at the end of the day, they threw 13,000 quid up in the air in the hotel room, going yippee, as you would. But then they started to develop software as well, so I played those, definitely. Yeah.
Can I just say to the people at the back, there are there's a seat there, there's two over here, I think there's one over there as well. Come forward by all means if you'd like to. Settle in, make yourselves comfortable. We've got a lot to talk about. Okay, so what are we looking at there?
This is the roughs and sketches. This is from Sketchbook, because it's an important process I have to go through. I was given the brief to do the chess player, which is playing chess against a computer. So naturally I was thinking robotic and chromium. And these are just quick thumbnail scribbles in the sketchbook to get the balance and the competition and how I wanted to do it. I don't know who the P45 from Beardsley was from, but I finally got some work. And this is just the list of all the things to buy. I would annotate my sketchbook and any working drawings freely, cover them in paint. As you might see.
Did you have a big studio? Did you have a big setup? Were you...
No. Well, I had a room in the flat that was a studio with a desk on it and all the equipment I needed.
Now, just one thing before we really get into games. I understand that you were a music fan and you were thinking about cassettes at an early stage.
Yes.
But from a music perspective.
No, that was from an artwork perspective, because my goal
was
I really wanted to get into doing album cover sleeves, and I'd done some work with Roger Dean, who lived in Brighton as well, so putting type paste ups together for his Dragon World books. I did quite a few of those, but that was always something I wanted to get into, and then as cassettes seemed to be taking over from albums, I was really concerned that you didn't have that big artwork, so in the sketchbook I drew a multi-fold method to put into a cassette so that you could actually get the big artworks again.
And then presumably that really paid off when... so gaming wasn't an industry you were thinking of working in? You were more interested in the music?
It sort of came along about the same time.
I guess it wasn't there.
It wasn't there. No, it wasn't there. I mean, when I started illustrating, there wasn't even D-Paint then. There was no programs.
Oh, D-Paint.
There was no internet, no emails. It was just draw and paint. We didn't feel underprivileged at the time because the technology wasn't there. We were using state-of-the-art stuff, which came to the fore when I bought an A3 fax machine that could send halftone anywhere, and they were quite good that came out. It was cost me £2,000 at the time. It's ridiculous.
So your first entry into gaming was a fortunate meeting with Nick about Quicksilver.
Yes.
And did you pitch to him? Did he invite you? How did chess play?
I first met Nick when I was in foundation year, before I went to Brighton Art School. I met him in the ante-room at Winchester Prison because his friends didn't know anyone who was 21 and married and respectable, so-called, who could bail him out for £50 surety. So I was dragged along and I met him for the first time, signed the form, and out he came.
You bailed him out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how you started working with Quicksilver.
Well, that's how I met
Make
him.
criminal friends, aspiring gaming developers.
He remembered it when I bumped into him a few years later after I returned to Southampton. And
Did he give you about 50 quid?
No, I didn't have to pay it. He was a good guy. Yeah.
So this is the first one.
You noticed in the slide before there were a number of chess pieces, and I had to redraw them every size. You know, imagine that in Illustrator, you just scale it, it's bang bang done. But all these had to be drawn separately and again. So time saving is a good thing now. Yeah, that with the illustration, you see the space has to be left for the spine and the back flap with the blurb. So everything was, had to fit.
And you, from your interest in music, had already been thinking about this before anybody had hired you in games, which is...
Yeah.
So Quicksilver's The Chess Player was the first one.
Very first one, yeah, and then that...
And how much input did you have? This probably applies to a lot of the games you've worked on. How much of it was your idea? How much brief did you get?
But very little from Quicksilver. I'd have a chat with Mark Isles, who was sort of running the production side, and he would do all the blurb, the text on the back, which is often highly amusing and quite surreal at times. And it was just all tongue-in-cheek. We had such fun because this was a time when the people who created the ideas and innovated actually ran the industry. And that is just such an exhilarating time. And this is why we all love retro stuff, I'm sure. It's before the corporate guys took over and started, carried on the big business it was inevitably going to become. But these early days were just so heady. We were having the time of our lives, all of us.
Was there any pressure to do stuff in black and white so it was cheaper to print?
None.
Not even for the chess player, because your board is red and yellow, whereas you can imagine space, silver, a lot of that is black and white, but your chessboard is yellow and red. Nobody ever said, save money, do it on the white.
No, what Nick explained to me was that that they've been selling off games with photocopied covers on, basically. J.K. Gray, he was one of the early guys. It was all Xerox copied. And he said they were going to move up a gear into more professionalism, and they were getting colour printing done. And that really excited me. And we never looked back to black and white at all.
And how long did that take you to turn around?
That one I spent quite a bit longer on because a lot of work into the prep for it, because it was an important gig. I really wanted to get it right. And I remember taking around the drawing with the first mask cut out for them to look at. And he looked round at John Hollis and went, so that's an accolade. I was pleased with that.
Worth bailing him out for.
Well, yeah.
So what came next? And how often? You're in with Quicksilver, so what's it like now?
I'd have 2 or 3 of these a week sometimes to get through, yeah.
Because remember, this is when the gaming industry was just churning it out, wasn't it? It was mostly good as well, not churning it out in a bad way.
No, that's right, yeah.
2 or 3 a week, though, that's a lot going on.
Yeah, I would want to turn something around in 3 or 4 days, because otherwise you overwork it, it dies on you, and you think horrible at the end.
There's a famous artist, somebody in the audience might know, Dali or Van Gogh, I think, who said, you never so much finish a piece of art as just give up on it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Anyone remember who that was?
I think it was Dali.
It was Dali, wasn't it? Yeah.
I don't think I sent a work out without having horrible doubts, and I put it on Red Star at 7 in the morning after working all night down in Swansea, and I would just I'd be really nerve-wracked.
This is the end. Yeah. I hate this one.
Well, yeah. I don't know what it was. So this is the next one I did, which was a ZX81 game called Croaker Crawler. But again, really looking at the layout for it and trying to get that right. And that's just in a sketchbook.
And that's the artwork going across the spine and round onto the back cover.
Yeah, which in the end they said, no, it's ZX81, we want it in a square on the front. So, but this is throwaway, and you can do that. It takes a few moments, and if it doesn't work, scrap it, move on.
That's not throwaway and takes a few moments, then, surely. How long did that take you?
Well, I'd have done that in a few days, definitely. So you research, get the reference,
I think we can all see what game this was trying to be, as well. Did anybody buy this? This was released, wasn't it?
Yes, ZX81.
Nobody got...
Most of you weren't born by then.
Oh, well. I feel old now. Okay, so that's your second one that you did for Quicksilver, and then what else have we got? So
this is the first one I did for a company other than Quicksilver, because I would go up with them to the trade halls and the trade shows, and a portfolio was building up because I was getting a lot of work done with them. And I was introduced to Tim Hartnell of Interface Books and his partner Liz North, and they introduced me to this young lad, Timescape software, and it's called Wild West Hero. So I did the familiar roughs again, quick sketches, and go on to the paintings. I think that was one of my favourites at the time. I remember really disappointing because he thought he owned the original when he paid me the money, and I said, you don't. And he was really upset with me. I never worked for him again, but...
Sorry, what didn't he like?
He didn't like the fact that he hadn't bought the original. He licensed it for... I said, any advertising, promotion, the cover, anything you like, but I keep the original. And that was something I always stuck to.
There's something about that one that seems a little different to other work of yours. Were you trying to have more fun with that one?
Well, yeah, and also broadening my scope. You know, I wanted to capture as much work as I could because, you know, I think a lifelong career as an illustrator is pretty difficult to achieve. And so I was quite happy to do that. Did
you ever try and get work in the music industry while all this was happening?
I did meet Manfred Mann, and I didn't get any work, but I went to the studios, and he liked it, but you know, it's quite convoluted to commission through that channel.
Whereas the gaming industry was new, so of course it was, I guess there was less business involved. People were just getting stuff done.
Well, that's right, yeah. And I remember Mark Isles calling me in, and I went in on I think it was a Thursday afternoon, and he said, look, I'm real stuck, I should have commissioned this painting, I've got to have it in the morning, got to, because it's got to go out. I was Black Thunder, probably my least favourite artwork, but he got it next morning, through the night.
Just got to get it done overnight sometimes. Yeah. At this stage, were the games done? Were you given a finished game and told to...
Yeah, sometimes, and sometimes, you know, it was a beta version, you know, quite close to finish.
But you did play them before you illustrated?
Yeah, every one, yeah. I remember with Frenzy, I pressed the forward and the sideways arrow and it went diagonally. I thought, great, that's really cool. I've never been able to do that before. This is the first rough for Populous because, again, this is a real honour to get that gig because I'd done the first isometric game and now I was doing the first God game. And I was invited into Electronic Arts. They had a little office block in Langley next to the station, and they parked the lorry underneath, did all their warehousing and distribution. There was a little development team up on the top, and this row of windows which have vertical Venetian blinds on them, all closed. And Joss Ellis took me to the door, punched in the keypad secret code, and we went in, and he said, "This is going to be immense," and showed me the beta version of Populous, and asked me to go away and just come up with some ideas. So I did that, and I took it down to them. We stood on an easel, and they had all the development team in there, and they all loved it, except one guy said, "Looks like a golf divot."
He just had a bad round.
Yeah. I caught up with him later, and he said, "I was wrong," which was very generous of him.
Were they calling it a God game? Populous, as you just mentioned. We all recognise that as the first God game, but perhaps we didn't think of it as a God game until more of them came along and we realised this was a genre and this had become it. Was anybody talking about it as a God game?
No, they weren't talking about it as a God game, but they were saying this is going to be really, really big. I was then invited to go and meet up with the Bullfrog team, who were in a small tenement by the bridge in Guildford. I went to the top floor and a computer cast is a mess. I met Les Edgar, Glenn Corpes and Peter Molyneux there, were all working on it. And I'd done the visuals by then, and they'd actually commissioned Industrial Light and Magic to do a video of it. And they played the video, and I thought, wow, I've really arrived now.
Yeah, that's the big time.
Wow, yeah.
The game, so again, you mentioned earlier on, you'd played Populous.
Oh, yeah.
At least the beta version.
Yeah.
So, did the game influence, the game presumably influenced your artwork for it, it always had to represent the game.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a time when any artwork you did influenced something in a game? Did anybody see anything you'd made and thought, we want to change a little bit of what we're working on?
I remember doing, much later doing Pandora, and Tim Child borrowed that because it was his inspiration for the Satellite Game TV show. And I only just got it back, I've forgotten he got it, but he'd had it framed on the wall of the office. And so yeah, that did lead to that.
Now of course this is a different format, isn't it? We're talking boxed games here, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah, because they were selling cassettes at $7.95, and Rod Cousins explained to me that by adding an extra £1 to the production, they could get a box and then charged £14.95. And he explained that was
Why did we not know?
added perceived value, APV.
They know what they're doing, don't they? We all went and paid £14.99.
Anyway, this is the one they ended up with on the cover, and this is one I did, which taught me a great lesson as an illustrator, because they asked me to do it again. The reason being that, through personal development, I like the effect of the recession of landscape and getting distance and space. But this was their big baby. That they wanted isometric, they wanted more of a top-down view of the action going on. And so I was asked to do it again. And thinking back, they were absolutely right. It wasn't about my personal development, it was about them flogging lots of their prize pet project. This is a big thing for them.
With the left-hand one, you have the horizon. It's more of a globe, isn't it?
I go on to sort of cataclysmic events and horrific holocausts, because that's what the game represented. So to have all these people falling off the world, and
the longer you look at that one, there are things
great horrible things going on.
Yeah, when I was a lot younger.
I did the same with Populous too. It was a similar idea. Then the buildings collapsing, great tsunami rushing in. Earthquakes.
Did you find that easier or harder, since you'd already done Populous, working on a sequel to it?
No, I just it was full of ideas at the time, because it was just such an exciting time to be doing it.
And so this is... the reason I asked why, if anybody was calling it a God game, because we know it as a God game, but so that one's got a lot more focus on gods as opposed to the world. So... Were you tempted to include gods for Populous?
Well, those misty characters that populate the top, they were.
You didn't want to put one.
Ethereal.
Did you ever have a version where you put it front and centre?
No, I did have a note in the Populous rough, which said, I could make this look like composite parts of a god face, but they didn't want that. Right. With this one, I did that spire, and I worked hard on researching how spires are built and how it would collapse and break. I really liked that. But then they said, fine, really like it, but spires are very Christian and Western, and this is Trials of the Olympian Gods, so we want a tower instead. So if you go to the next one. So a tower they got. So that's the life of an illustrator, and it's true, it's fit to their purpose, it's what they needed. You've got to be professional about these things and not do what I want, but what they need.
Was there anyone, and you may not want to answer, but I'm going to ask you, was there anyone who you would never have wanted to work with again, because no matter what you did, you just couldn't get a good brief out of them as to what they wanted?
Yeah, Stephen Hall at Grand Slam Entertainment.
That was easier than I thought.
owed me about £2,000 when they folded the company.
Right.
Reason not to like him.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, are there more slides on games before we get to Knightmare? Are there any other?
Yeah, that's pretty well it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's Shadow of the
things
Beast
like the Sentinel, the Way of the Exploding Fist.
Yeah.
Tetris. You did some work on Tetris.
Yeah,
Tetris
I
was
did
already
two
a thing,
versions
wasn't
of
it?
it.
So, how did you get involved with Tetris?
Well, our family played it to death on the Atari ST, so that was not a difficult
And what was
thing.
your involvement with it?
No, I just got asked to do a couple of covers. I mean, one was for Mirrorsoft, I think the other was for Virgin.
Okay.
And it wasn't a hard thing because I knew the game inside out.
Was this before it was released in the UK?
No, it had been out before. These were budget titles that followed on. So I'd take any work going, really.
Fair enough. As you say, the life of an illustrator, the life of an artist. Speedball was one of yours as well.
Yes.
And did you ever realise that was going to be as big as it was?
No, I didn't. I like the rollerball connotation. So the figure has got rips in the vinyl skin that show metallic components underneath, missing eyes and things like that. It's great fun, isn't it?
Do you have any favourites?
I was quite fond of that one. I signed it with a red kite, which was exclusive to the area I live in at the time. They've had a good breeding program.
Are you going to tell us there's one of those on all of your covers?
No, just that one. I wish.
Easter egg.
Yeah. That was the first colour rough, which in a sense I prefer to the finished work. It's just got more vitality. But you have to be so careful when you're masking, it all gets wooden edged really.
Yeah, of course, I suppose there's a pressure on you. Because these are marketing materials, aren't they? These are box arts. These are the things that make us in the shops impulse buy. I used to go with what little pocket money I had, and I used to pick up a lot of $1.99 and $2.99, you know, Mastertronic titles, look for the yellow boxes on the side to make sure I got the right one. And I bought games that I knew nothing about. I used to read Crash and stuff like that, but I bought games that I did know nothing about based on their boxes, and I'm sure many of us did as well. So yeah, there's a marketing pressure on what you're doing. You prefer the left-hand version of that, but that wasn't going to sell.
Painterly wise, yeah. And for an art idea. But yeah, the whole point of the box cover is to grab attention, and when you've got a lot of them face on, you've got to be as zappy as possible. You've got to leap out and grab the gun, because as soon as they've gone through that 10 seconds of looking at it and then turning it over, it's done its job.
You did branding as well then? You were doing the logos and stuff for games as well?
Yeah, I did. I think most of the lettering.
Right.
I didn't do that one, Roger Dean. You know.
Did anybody come along and spoil any of your work?
No. I always left lots of space for it, and I always accepted that the marketing guys had their say. It's all teamwork, really. But coming up with the idea, I thought it was the plum job. You know, I really love that. I love a blank piece of paper and then thinking, what am I going to do? You know,
Was there ever a project where you were really up against it time-wise, and you were looking at a blank piece of paper and thinking, what am I going to do?
I think I'd always come up with something. You know, I'd just go through the night or sit down watching telly, just drawing till it came.
Brilliant. There's a lesson there for any aspiring artists, or writers for that matter, is keep going and keep trying. So that's pretty much as far as you wanted to go with the gaming side of things. Before we talk about Knightmare, does anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask on our gaming history? Yes?
The development, obviously when you think of these ideas, do you kind of like mind maps, mind bubbles, you know, draw ideas for what you want to kind of make the finalised image look like for your game covers?
It's like your creative process. Did you go through a lot of ideas?
Yeah,
and boil it down to one?
I would try 3 or 4 different angles at least, and if I was going to present those roughs to a client, I'd make sure I'd steer into the one that I've worked on quite a bit more, because that's the one I wanted to do. And it usually worked. You know, it's you do a couple of real Lulus, and then the plum one. They choose the plum one. I had them well trained sometimes.
Any other questions? Please do. David's very happy to answer that. Yes, Rick.
I mean, obviously, I wasn't born when any of this sort of stuff was going on. But what are you currently working on at the moment, and where are you based?
I built my website, which, you know, I felt so clever putting PayPal buttons in. I did the Knightmare books, so I got right into InDesign, and I got that working. I did ebook version of it. But originating new material, I just sort of keep sketching and drawing, and I'm working in that really. You know, I'd like to wheel the airbrush out again, but then you look at Photoshop, and the decisions you make are, you can raise them, you can change them, you can recolour them. You know, this is set in stone, it's done. You know, so I think Photoshop's got a lot going for it, quite honestly.
Some artists would feel the other way around. They would feel like they like the immediacy of you know, committing stuff to paper, as opposed to I can endlessly start again or start a bit again.
Yeah.
You've embraced modern technology.
Well, I have, yes. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about old technology. Your £2,000 A3 fax machine. Did you were faxing sketches?
Yes.
Colour artwork?
Yeah, I remember when I was doing Populous, I had finished it, and I was woken up at 1:30 in the morning with the phone by the bed. I said, hello? So David Rowe? I said, oh, come on, stop pissing about. Who's this? It's Aki Kodama from Engineering Tokyo. Hello.
That's a good time difference.
And he wanted 4 Populous related illustrations done, so okay.
And you faxed them to Japan?
I faxed the drawings, yeah, and then they came over. I met them in London.
Wow.
And in the end, I had them converted to 5x4 transparencies and posted them to them.
And they were published?
Yeah, they
amazing.
Yeah.
So you've had work in Japan, and obviously in the UK, and in many other parts around the world. Did you like seeing it? Did you like going into shops and going, oh, that's mine?
Knowing that it made the light of day, yeah, didn't get rejected, that's pretty warming.
But it must be good to see your work in print, and see people buying it,
yeah.
and big posters in shops displaying it. So.
Yeah. I mean, that big boy I've got on the stand was in the Champs-Élysées in Paris for the Virgin Sega Mega Drive push. They'd given a watch away free in 40,000 games, and that's what they wanted. It was quite an onerous task because they were very particular about the guy. He had to have his sort of felt jacket, college boy, looking clean cut. And the first thing I did was leather jacket, looked like Fonz and had a quiff, black hair and blue highlights, you know. So I must have done 20 different heads and facts before they said, yep, that's the one. But it's important to get it right for them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, no more questions on game? Oh, yes.
While you were working in Japan, did any aspect of Japanese media go on to influence your art style?
No. Well, I wasn't in Japan, you know, I was working remotely and sending stuff to them. But, no, I suppose I can remember Budokan for electronic arts. I had to research, you know, samurai and the swords and so on to do that, but that was just for that project.
So we'll move on to Knightmare, which was so far ahead of its time. So, how did that begin? Was that another fortunate meeting?
It was
really someone else?
Really fortunate. I went into Melbourne House in Richmond. I think it was Exploding Fist 2 that I was delivering, and Paula Byrne, the art director, said, I've just had a call from someone called Tim Child at Anglia TV, and he's asking if he can be put in contact with you. I said, okay. I said, can you give me the phone? I rang him, and I was up from Hampshire to Richmond to deliver this, and I made the appointment, went straight up to Norwich because I had my portfolio with me.
This is TV.
Yeah.
This is big time.
Wow, I thought it's a big opportunity. When he told me what he wanted to do, and I thought this has never been done before, and that's really where I like to be.
Now, it was so ambitious. Was there a time when they were saying what they wanted to do, and you thought this has never been done before? Did you think it's not going to happen either?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I was warned that, you know, that they had no budget and they wanted 5 paintings for the pilot program, and if they got the gig, then they would go on and produce the series. And I thought, yeah, I've heard that one before.
Yeah. So do this for free for us.
Yeah, I did it for the cost of 1 painting. I did 2 paintings and 3 more acetate overlays that changed the painting significantly.
And when you went to see them and they told you, yeah, we're going to make a TV show in which kids are going to be dungeoneers and they're going to roam around a dungeon which is going to have doors and monsters and things like that, and it's all going to be composited together and done in chroma key, and we're going to make it done in fixed point perspective and stuff that's never been done before and things that have never done before. How did you feel? Were they that advanced? Did they know what they were aiming for?
They worked it out. Ros Inglis, the set designer, she said she was going to commission Jean Père, the French special effects expert in filming, and he came up with a grid that had the exact camera viewpoint and that lens as it would look down into the 3D void, you know, the blue painted room that the dungeoneer would have to walk around. And so, armed with that grid, that was something I had to strictly get to.
Is that what we see here?
Yeah, that's the Jean Père grid, copies of which I still have.
So by the time you got involved, they had conversations, they had somehow got some go-ahead from senior management to at least make a pilot.
Yes.
And they needed somebody to bring it to life.
Yes.
That's a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, I thrive on it. I just love it. I love it. You know, I was right in the zone. When it came to producing the artwork for the show, I was commissioned for 31 images to start with. Okay. And I remember Sally Freeman, the director, rang me one day and she was in tears saying, we're shooting in 3 weeks, we haven't got 1 painting yet, and I don't think it's going to happen.
All right.
Yeah,
and why didn't they have 1 painting?
I just won all the print work from Telecomsoft, all their inlays and adverts, and I was doing work for them. Okay. So one of the students I used to teach life drawing to at Southampton Art School, one of the better ones, I got him into my kitchen with a new parallel motion board. He did all the print work and I concentrated on Knightmare. And I had to set a tight regime of get up at 6 a.m, work to 2 a.m, 4 hours sleep. And I did that for 3 weeks, 7 days a week. And the aim was to produce a painting in 1 day and the drawing for the next day's painting. And I delivered.
And sleep 4 hours and paint up yesterday's painting. Yesterday's sketch. If you're going to make something that's never ever been done on television before, you just got to get it done.
But the thing is, you know, it wasn't depressing in any way. I was just living on adrenaline because
you're involved in this, aren't you?
Fantastic project to be on.
It's not a bad thing to be involved with. You want to make it happen. It must have been difficult to get your head around at first, though. I mean, not seen anything work like this at all.
Well, you know, it was explained to me that all the weathermen and newsmen on TV had that horrible blue fringe around them where they couldn't get the chroma keying right. Well, they actually managed to get rid of that completely.
Yeah,
they also burned a strong spotlight onto the Dungeoneer so that they could keep his shadow and have that on my painting. So the first time I saw one, you know, I thought those columns are impossibly angled, you know, for the vertical perspective. You see the character walked on underneath with his shadow. Like, oh, it's like that room is real.
There must have been a point in its development where you all saw the first coming together of a Dungeoneer, not necessarily being filmed as like the actual challenge, but just walking out in a studio. You must have seen a Dungeoneer on a blue, because it was blue screened, wasn't it? Your studios were blue screened.
Yeah.
Chroma keying usually uses green or blue because those are the colours that are least prevalent in skin. So that's why it's green or blue.
Right.
I don't know why you pick one or the other, but it's always green or blue. And your studios were blue.
Yes.
And it was so much better than anything that we'd seen on the weather, definitely. I don't remember fringing in Nightmare at all, whereas the weather, as you say...
I don't think it had ever been used in an action TV programme at all. And so, you know, good old Tim, he really got that act together.
And when you saw a Dungeoneer in the blue screen studio, and they comped it together with your artwork, what happened when everybody first saw it?
Well, we knew it was going to work.
Yeah. Did you think we'd nailed this?
I just felt really glowing. I was just really happy about it. I didn't feel quite that smug, maybe, I don't know.
So that's a workup of the sketch we just saw?
Yeah. The sketch sort of, can we just pop that back? Yeah, this had to conform to the perspective on the floor, even though it wasn't that visible.
Yeah, and the walls, it feels like that one we're looking towards a corner, as opposed to the grid sketch before, where we were looking at a flat back plane. But
the grid, though,
it's still there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is still there. That's a quick sketch of Lilith, just to show that she had to sit on that. But to refer back to the grid, this had to be 2 meters long. Each of these squares represents 1 meter. So the seat she sat on was 2 meters by 1 meter and 2 meters up. And the footstool was 1 meter up and the same width. Because they had these regular standard blocks, painted blue, set blocks to paint to work with. So that when she came to sit on the blue block, they could actually drape her cloak over the side. And it would look like it was actually on that rock.
Have you got the slide of the blue screen studio?
No, I haven't. I don't. Oh,
that one?
Yeah,
that's the one.
That's her, sat on that.
That's Nightmare, everybody.
Sorry to pop the illusion.
Everybody now knows what it looks like, except for that Dungeoneer. Are you here?
There's the strong shadow I spoke of. Yeah.
And so all the blues removed in chroma keying, and we're left with something like that. It's astonishing, isn't it?
This was CG, the causeway in the end, you know. I'd prefer painted, but...
why was that?
Yeah, I just think it fitted the image more. This was sort of, they're quite crude, the computer graphics at the time.
Mm-hmm. Why wasn't it part of the drawing? Why didn't you just provide
because they needed it to grow and then collapse behind.
Oh yes, of course.
So
that's right. What were they doing there? They were... Does anyone remember? That was something like that. Didn't they answer questions from Lilith?
Yeah, 3 riddles, yeah.
And they had ground grid, that's why. Okay.
And he would have picked up objects in the room before and ignored the hairbrush, quite rightly, because who needs a hairbrush? But Lilith did. So, gone.
Were you involved in... did you get involved in this project early enough to have an input on the world? Obviously you've done the artwork, but did they know it was going to look like this, or was it a blank slate as to whether it was sort of caves and fantasy, or outer space, or... Was that world set, or did you have input on that?
The freedom I had was on the finish, and they would give a brief faxed outline as to what was required for that, and I would be shown the sequence of rooms that they would go through, which is in the book and in the e-book, which you can get online at davidrowe.net. Oh, they said not to do that.
Don't be shy. Did they say not to do that?
No.
Oh, good, because it's davidrowe.net. I haven't been told not to do that. So, were you involved with character design?
No,
Did you get any
that's all
costumes?
Tim's work.
Okay.
He devised the scenario. He was a great fan of the Dungeons and Dragons
Right.
and the books.
And you had a fantasy background. You said when you were a child,
Yeah.
so your fantasy was already influencing your early artwork.
He always told me he liked the clammy rocks and the granite textures and things. I came up with the airbrush, so
Yeah.
it still does.
Were you ever at any of the shooting of Knightmare? Did you?
Yeah,
ever
I
see any of the
was invited up to see the work
Okay,
in progress.
I'm curious, in that blue screen shot, there are no doors.
He had to go in through the serpent's mouth.
Yeah, so what did he actually do? Because there isn't a hole for him to make a way through, but
No,
did
he
he see
would-
one because he's got the helmet on anyway.
He would walk up to the back wall and then gone.
Did somebody run onto set and turn him around and send him off the other way?
He just got to the opening and then magically evaporated.
Oh, no, I remember that on the
onto
TV
next
show. I
room.
mean, in the studio, like actually there and there.
Oh, yeah,
How
probably,
was-
yeah, they'd
I
come
was like, stop!
leading my hand out.
Come over. So in all the rooms in Knightmare are one studio,
Yeah, that's it basically. And any props required. I know, had staircases.
and that hall had to be very accurately positioned
Yeah.
as per this grid.
I
The
think-
camera never moved.
No, it was concreted into the floor.
I was going to say,
It
I've
couldn't
worked
move.
on things like time-lapse photography and presenting events and stuff like that. You can't move the camera. They move. They just
No,
get
this
knocked
was
or
actually
something.
it was cemented into the floor so it couldn't move, the rostrum.
Right, there you go. Exactly, yeah. And those lights, those are massive studio lights. Those are just to make it as diffuse as possible.
Yep, that's to really give it and even like kill all the corners and edges.
Yeah.
Because that makes it more difficult to remove, obviously, because the last thing to go is the darkest bit. When you've got that, you hope you haven't killed anything you wanted to keep.
Now, if there was a Knightmare 2015 and you were involved,
Yeah.
what would you do differently? Obviously, technology has changed, but
Yeah.
from an artwork perspective, what would you do differently?
I would. I've got people I know very good with computer graphics who would be able to take a model of the room, which would be simple to create, texture bake, really top quality, high resolution images, and you would be able to fly the camera around any way you like, not only within the 3D package, but also with the camera on
Yeah.
the studio floor.
Motion control cameras.
Oh, that would be absolutely
We'll always find the
stunning, I
path
think.
at the same place at the same time.
I think the future for Knightmare, if it's to come back, would be, and I'm talking to Tim about this now, is to do an Oculus Rift version. So that the Dungeoneer has got Oculus Rift on and not a helmet. And network it so you play online. And if there was to be some sort of TV show of it, that would much better be placed on Netflix and YouTube than on broadcast television, which is, hopefully going to die quite soon. I'm fed up with looking at Sky going, rubbish, 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 rubbish. Well, that's half an hour gone.
There is a Knightmare Live.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that? I don't know how many
Yeah,
people
I
know
am.
about
Yeah,
it. Knightmare Live, you can actually play it. Has anybody played it?
yeah, I've
Yes.
seen
Oh,
it.
you have at the back as well. Have you played Knightmare Live?
So, yeah, you have, haven't you?
What did you think? Our little Dungeoneer.
Edinburgh Festival, what did you think?
Yeah.
I was,
Spider though, weren't you?
Oh, brilliant.
I was up in Edinburgh. What was last year? I did Edinburgh.
Foam
Yeah.
spider on the back of it.
Oh, yeah.
What was it like? What was it like at Knightmare Live? Did you have the helmet on and you've been guided around? I haven't seen it. I was in Edinburgh for a few years up to 2013, but I never had a chance to go and do it.
They had the actual engineer helmet.
The actual one?
The actual one, it's
Yeah.
a prop. They just pulled someone out at random from the audience to be the Dungeoneer, and then they had three comedians,
Yeah.
stand-up comedians, different ones every night, and they basically just played Nightmare, and they've already worked out various scenarios of whether they choose to go one door or...
Did they just have bits of set that they sort of moved around?
Yeah, back sets, like the gravitas face that comes out and he asks questions,
Oh,
the
yeah.
actual thing that they propped up on the stage, and it was like a really rubbish puppet.
Okay. Were you involved in any of that at all? Are they using your artwork?
Very good.
Yeah, the contact I had with them was I noticed that that they had a Kickstarter campaign that was using the helmet painting I'd done for one of the Corgi book jackets, and they were offering T-shirts as perks for people who
Okay.
pledge. So I got in touch with Paul Flannery and I said, I'm glad to see you like my artwork so much that you're making T-shirts for it. And he went, oh, ooh. I said, feel free and good luck with the campaign.
That's very generous of you, right?
I don't know, because the thing is, it's a logo now that's gone through my book and all the others, and it's giving a brand recognition right across the
Oh,
board.
the Knightmare logo's yours, is it?
Yeah, it's a
Of
corgi
course, the
book I
gaming
did.
logos we talked about, so this is your work as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, did you want to mention there is a book? Do
There is
tell
a
me.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kickstarter, no, the Indiegogo campaign that I ran, I was a bit nervous about because 80% of them fail. So I asked for £3,500 and raised 4,117. So I was pretty pleased about that.
And that was to press copies of,
That-
actual copies of a book, not an e-book?
That was to make an ebook,
Oh,
which I did, and then found out that the Android version, you couldn't use interactive slideshows and widgets. So I had to rebuild the whole thing for Android, which took quite a while. Then the pledges I gave were for a copy of the print version if people placed more than £75. So I had to prepare all of that and learn InDesign, which I've not really worked with before. So I made the book. And I suppose the pledges cost me at least half of what I raised, and it took nearly a year to do. So, I'm hoping it's going to do better.
Do you have copies of the actual book here at your
I've got
stand?
one left. I've sold out of the hardback version,
Right.
but we're going to do a paperback or softback.
Is it the sort of thing that's inside the art?
That's a spread. It gives you the idea. That's the drawing. There's a couple of screenshots from the show. That's Lilith Room in its context, and that's the green screen studio. They had to be that small because they were quite low resolution images from the day.
Of course, yeah. This is old school telly, isn't it?
But it's double page spread for each room. It goes through the whole dungeon basically.
So I know David has a lot of stuff on davidrowe.net, so you should check that out in your own time. David is also in our trading hall. If you haven't seen the traders hall, go into the main hall, halfway up the wall, turn left, you go through into the trading hall. There's lots of brilliant stuff in there. You have a stand in there as well. You've got some great big pictures.
Yeah, you can have a look now.
We have a few minutes left for some questions. I would love to squeeze some questions in right here. We've only got a couple of minutes. Does anybody want to ask anything about Knightmare? Yes, sir.
Have you got any favourite artwork from Knightmare?
Favourite room?
Yeah, I like the dragon room because I felt that I'd pretty well cracked the textures that I was after in that one. It's quite rough and textured, so I was quite pleased with that one. I like the Lilith room because that was the first one I did that had to involve props and I could see it work.
And another person as well, not just a static object, but somebody interacting with them as well as the dungeoneer.
Another one was a room with staircase, the Nilram room I think it was called. It had a couple of staircases in, and my rough had curved staircases. And they said, "You must be joking."
You want kids to walk upstairs?
The kids are walking down that with their helmet on, health and safety. Oh. And he said it would cost probably the entire show budget to have that built as a prop. So can we have straight ones, please? So all the time you learn about constraints as an illustrator.
Any more questions? Yes.
Yeah, just like to say, when I was younger as well, watching Nightmare, all the artwork in it, and the program itself was a very scary experience. The first time I saw it, I actually was very fearful of it. What kind of artist or art inspires you to draw?
Oh, I think one of my favourites is Drew Struzan, who did the Indiana Jones posters, because the techniques are just great. It's almost the way I wish I'd gone, because through art school I had to be so precise and careful, and learning to cut masks, it does tend to wood and fly everything. Whereas Drew Struzan just does a mid-colour wash at the background, puts in all the black bits first, really black, and draws with pencil, gets all the modelling and the detail. In his airbrush, he wouldn't use frisk film, he'd use a bit of acetate and just hold it and work that way, and then finish highlights with coloured pencils. And I think it's stunning the effect he gets. A lot of it's courtesy to the excellent studio photographers who've got brilliant lighting with a fringe of light backlighting the edges of his neck and so on. But I think have a look at them, Drew Struzan. He's very generous on his site, giving high-res images for you to look at.
Is it a quick question?
Yes.
Go.
The helmet, did you draw the helmet and then they produced the prop, or was it a prop?
That's a great question. I'm really glad to know that one.
They had the prop, and I just made a stab at it. I had reference, obviously, that I could see, but it's not entirely like the Helmet of Justice on the prop, but close enough.
The Helmet of Justice.
That's what it's called, yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah, a few people did know that. I think.
Amanda did.
As I say, David is in our trading hall, to the left of the main hall. You're there today and tomorrow as well? Is that
Yeah,
right?
happy to talk to anyone who's
So-
got more questions.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid, 'cause that's the end of our time for this talk. But I hope that's been a lovely trip down memory lane for all of you. The Helmet of Justice, learn something new every day. Ladies and gentlemen, you're around the corner.